In a quiet valley where the fog drifted like a half-remembered dream, and the bells only chimed when the wind thought to sing, stood an ancient forest. This forest was older than grief itself, and it held a secret the villagers knew but rarely spoke aloud. Every time someone in the valley shed a genuine tear of sorrow, a single forget-me-not would bloom somewhere deep beneath its canopy. These flowers were never touched. They weren't offerings to forgotten gods or tokens of remembrance. They were records. Each tiny blue petal held the immense weight of a sorrow too heavy for words. They were the silent testaments of mothers who had lost sons to the unforgiving mountains, of lovers parted by wars that had no name, and of children whose laughter had vanished into the earth too soon. With each passing generation, the forest floor grew bluer, a silent, watchful sea of accumulated heartbreak. But the forest did more than just collect sorrow. Once every 100 years, it would act. When the collective grief of the valley grew so deep it threatened to drown the living, the very roots of the forest would shift. A new path, lined with pale, ethereal blossoms, would appear, leading one chosen, grieving soul to the very center of the woods. There stood the heart tree, a colossal, ancient trunk whose bark pulsed softly, like a breathing chest. The heart tree offered the chosen one a single sacred act. They were allowed to press one forget-me-not from the forest floor into its living bark. In doing so, they could change one memory of the person they had lost. The magic wasn't to erase them, nor to bring them back from the stillness of death. It was only to alter one single moment, to smooth over one jagged edge of a wound, so that the living could find a way to continue. It was a gift of peace, a chance to mend a memory that had become a prison. This century, the forest made a choice that surprised everyone. It chose a child. Her name was Iria. She was so small, her frame so slight, that the villagers at first couldn't comprehend the depth of her grief. Her sorrow wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't scream for attention. It lingered. She cried quietly in forgotten corners and behind closed doorways, with a kind of sorrow that seeped into the very floorboards of her home. You see, Iria wasn't mourning someone who had died. She was mourning someone who was still alive. Her mother. Every night, her mother sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes gazing at something far away, something no one else could see. She spoke kindly enough. She fed Iria, tucked her into bed, and performed all the gentle duties of a mother. But the warmth is gone. The radiant love that had once filled their small home like sunlight had simply slipped away, replaced by an absence so complete, so profound, it hurt worse than any final goodbye. Iria didn't cry because her mother was cruel. She cried because she remembered a time when she wasn't. She remembered the laughter, the light in her eyes, the feeling of being the center of her mother's world. So when the forest called to her, it felt less like a choice and more like a summons. The path appeared at dawn, a shimmering ribbon of blue flowers glowing faintly with morning dew, leading from her doorstep into the misty woods. No one tried to stop her. The village elders watched from their windows, their faces etched with a quiet understanding. They knew the forest did not make mistakes. Its wisdom was older than their own. Iria followed the path, her small feet barely making a sound on mossy ground. The air grew still and sacred as she approached the heart tree. It was even larger than the stories described, its bark swirling with patterns that looked like ancient script. She placed her small palm against the trunk and felt a faint vibration, a gentle thrumming of thousands upon thousands of memories breathing just beneath them, surfaced countless joys and infinite griefs, all woven together like the tree's own roots. With trembling fingers, she picked a single forget-me-not from the base of the tree. As she held it, the tree seemed to whisper its ancient promise directly into her mind. Asterisk changed one memory. Only one. Asterisk. The villagers, watching from the edge of the woods, expected the child to do what any grieving person would. They thought she would ask the tree to soften her own pain, to make her forget the coldness that had crept into her mother's heart. They believed she would choose to remember her mother as she had always been warm, loving, and kind. It was the logical choice, the path to her own healing. But Iria, standing in the immense presence of the heart tree, shook her head. Her wish was not for herself. She pressed the delicate flower into the living bark and whispered her heart's truest desire, a plea not of forgetting, but of remembering. Let her remember. She didn't ask her mother to remember the loss that had hollowed her out, or the sorrow that had stolen her light. Irie's wish was for something much smaller, much simpler. Just one small moment, she whispered to the ancient wood. Let her remember the way I used to laugh in my sleep when I was a baby, safe and warm against her heart. A tremor ran through the heart tree. The bark seemed to sigh, and then it slowly, gently sealed itself around the tiny blue flower, absorbing it into its very being. At that exact moment, miles away in a quiet village kitchen, a woman sitting at a table suddenly pressed a hand to her chest. A forgotten warmth flooded back into a place she thought had been empty forever. A memory, bright and clear, of a sleeping child's happy sigh broke through the fog in her mind. And for the first time in years, she smiled, a real smile. The forest did not bloom a new flower that day. Instead, it felt as though the entire wood took a deep, collective breath and then exhaled, releasing a century of held tension. And from that day forward, the forget-me-nots never grew in that valley again. The sea of blue vanished, because the ancient forest, in its infinite wisdom, had finally learned something new from a small child's selfless love. It learned that grief does not only belong to the dead, and it learned that sometimes love does not need to be changed or forgotten. Sometimes it only needs to be remembered. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing for more tales that explore the magic hidden in our world.